Good evening, salam alaikum, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome all of you for the IOSH Oman branch event. Our today's branch event theme is culture and well-being. What is the relationship? And also we'll be talking on the fugitive emission monitoring and control. So this is the agenda for today's event. I'll be giving the IOSH branch update. Just to introduce all of you, I'm Dr. Ilyas Sohani. I'm the IOSH Oman branch chair, and along with me, IOSH Oman Executive Committee, welcomes all of you. Then we'll have two presentations, one on culture and well-being, and the second presentation on fugitive emission monitoring and control. And then we'll also have IOSH updates, what new things are coming for the IOSH, and we'll be having the Q&A session after each presentation. So I request all of you that if you have any questions, please park your questions in the chat box, and we have engineer Samara Sala who will be taking your questions to the presenters after each presentation. So first of all, let me welcome all my Omani friends and congratulate all Oman nationals, all the experts living in Oman and from the GCC. We are going to celebrate 52nd National Day on 18th of November, which is after 2 days. And I say, congratulate all the local community and all the people of Oman, including the residents, on the prosperous growth and development of Oman under the leadership of His Majesty Haytham bin Tariq. And also we remember the late His Majesty Sultan bin Qaboos. So with this, we as a IOSH, just to, for the members who are, joining first time for the event, or who are not the IOSH members, IOSH is the Institute of Occupational Health and Safety Professionals, and the IOSH was started in 1945, and it got the Royal Charter issued since 2002. The vision of IOSH, the mission of IOSH is leading voice in global occupational health and safety. The IOSH has collaborated with the different leading organizations across the world, which includes the World Health Organization, United Nations Global Impact. I recently, with the ILO, in IOSHPO, European Network of Safety and Health Professionals. IOSH members are across the world in the 130 countries, and recently IOSH has reached to 49,000 members. We as the IOSH Oman branch, we are actively working since 2013, and currently we have 274 members. We have a networking opportunity. We provide the networking opportunities for all the occupational health and safety professionals in the region. We provide the networking platform for the authorities, regulators, and industry sectors. We have a IOSH branch core committee with the 15 members. We provide the free seminars, branch events, and CPD tools like the today's event. And we have an impactful presence in Oman, which is being recognized by the industry. We also influence the government and businesses by enhancing the occupational health and safety standards in Oman. And we are the key player in providing the platform for exchanging the best practices. This is what the IOSH Oman committee, and we, on behalf of committee, I again welcome all of you for this today's event. The benefit of IOSH Oman branch is that we provide the valuable opportunities for networking through our branch events. All our branch events are free of cost, and we also participate in the different seminars, conferences, and workshops. And we also arrange the site visits for betterment and for the support of our members. We provide the chance to promote the health and safety in our area by providing our platform, common platform for the authorities, government bodies, and influencers and the professionals. We also provide opportunities for the personal developments and for maintaining the professional status for the occupational health and safety professionals. And we give the network opportunities all the members around this region. So this is the membership details of IOSH Oman branch. So we have a total 274 members. So we have a 38% increase in the membership from the last year. And the reason is that we were active even during the COVID time, and every month we provide the support to our occupational health and safety professionals in Oman. The IOSH has recently developed the competency framework, and which is again enhanced. And our branch events, which are focusing on helping the members for developing their core competencies or technical competencies or behavioral competencies based on the IOSH blueprint or competency framework. So our branch events are organized on every third Wednesday, and which includes the presentations like we are going to have today, also the CPD IPD sessions and the panel discussions. We had an impactful presence in the past couple of months. We are continuously supporting our members, and these are the events where we actively participated, or the events we organized. So we had a presence in the Global HSC conference. We had a presence in the MENA Health and Safety Environment Forum, which was in Dubai, and also recently we participated in the Oman Fire and Safety and Security event. So we have a presence in the seminars, conferences, and also we provide the dedicated branch events on the different diversified topics to support our members. These are some glimpses of our online events as well as our physical events, what we participated or what we organized. Recently, our executive member, Engineer Samara Sahara, also released a video on the child safety, which is both in English and Arabic, which is available on the IOSH Oman branch webpage. If you go to that, and it's a really very good video, and which you can use to publicize the child safety across your community. Now, since the pandemic, we have seen there has been increased focus on the culture and well-being within the organizations. And what is this culture and what is this well-being and what is the relationship between two? This is the topic of our first presentation. The session, which will be taken by Kate Phil, will explore these questions and the role of international standards body on the ISO 45001 and 45003. So the presentation topic, what we'll be having now is culture and well-being. What is the relationship? Let me welcome Kate Phil from the BSI. She is the global head health and safety and well-being for the BSI. She is an influential health and safety practitioner. She got the most influential individual in the health and safety in 2021. She is expert in the safety and well-being with a 20+ year of experience. She was driving the BSI global strategy for creating a safer, healthier, and fairer and inclusive workforce. Whether it is as a regulator or a consultant or a thought leader, she had an impactful presence, and she is also ambassador for cultural change in the region. The Kate inspires the colleagues and stakeholders globally to make a difference in terms of engaging the people, well-being, and the forefront. The Kate has recently developed the first global training and certification program for ISO 45003 on psychological and safety management. And she has also authored the best practices book. So let me welcome Kate for this event. And Kate, over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you also for the invite to come and present to the Oman IOSH branch. I'm really honoured, so thank you very much for the opportunity. So while I start sharing, getting my screen and my slides ready, I'm conscious that this is quite a big topic to cover in 30 minutes. So I'm going to try and really give an overview and some signposting on this topic. I'm conscious also that many of you won't have English as a first language, so I will try and balance my desire to share as much information with you and the balance to not talk too quickly. So hopefully I will find that balance just about right. So as Nilesh commented on in the introduction, since the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a very different focus on culture. And I think it was really interesting during a full global pandemic. And I think I also reflect on this because actually we've had a lot of regional epidemics. And I think, if we look at something like SARS that impacted the Middle East and Asia, these impacts are much were known about. And I think probably in many respects, your region and Asia were probably further down the line in terms of having a culture of care. But COVID-19 took this to the global community. And I think it was the first time that we've ever been in a situation where everybody was impacted by the same thing at the same time and having the same challenges. You know, we all had these challenges in terms of what it meant for our work. We all had the challenges in terms of the concerns for our own health and our family health. We were suddenly having to deal with something that fundamentally we've never had to deal with to the scale before. And as a result of that, a lot of hierarchical barriers were broken down. I'm sure many of you, like I found, you know, were having conversations with our senior managers through Zoom or through Teams, and they were at home and they were in their, you know, favorite t-shirt, and the kids were coming in to ask them questions, or the dog was jumping on them during calls. And I think it really sort of broke down some barriers, and it created this culture of care that we hadn't seen before. And one of the things that we found, BSI does a report every year to look at organizational resilience, which I'm going to talk more about in a moment. And it found that those organizations that had really focused on looking after their people were the ones that were most resilient. They were weathering the challenges, the storm of the pandemic. And as you know, different parts of the world started to come out of it, they were in a much stronger position. So it has been, I think, a really fundamental change in the way that we see people, and particularly within the context of work, our workers and our employees. But it also highlighted some challenges, and particularly an uncomfortable truth. We saw that, you know, that culture of care, that focus on people wasn't universal. You know, some sectors, some parts of the world didn't have that same focus. The slide that you can see, the graph that you can see on this slide was from the US. They do a survey every year to look at how safe workers feel on their job. And you can see that during 2020, so that year of when the pandemic first hit us, that feeling of safety dropped significantly. And I think one of the things that it really highlighted, that the culture of organizations in terms of looking after their people was not where it needed to be. And fundamentally, it highlighted that we don't trust our workers and our employees. You know, we were very reluctant to let them work flexibly or remotely where that was a possibility before the pandemic, which is why we didn't do it. During the pandemic, where we could, if we were more of a service industry, we were able to adopt this new hybrid working, virtual working. And now as we come out of the pandemic and this virtual working is here to stay, we are uncovering this uncomfortable truth, because we've got senior managers saying, well, I don't trust people that they're working productively at home. I want them in the office so I can see what they're doing. And it highlights that fundamentally we have this lack of trust for our workforce. So we can see it in those questions. We can see it in other areas. You know, the things that we might think of as organizational challenges are really an indication that there's probably an underlying poor culture. If you work, you know, maybe in manufacturing or the built environment, you might have issues in terms of quality. That's a good sign that there's something wrong with the culture. There may be poor productivity. You may have higher turnover of staff or trouble recruiting staff. You may have a lot of complaints internally between different people within the workplace, but you might have an increase in client or customer complaints. And these are all indications that something is wrong with the culture. And if there is something wrong with the culture, then organizations aren't resilient. And I think this is a phrase that has grown in awareness because of the pandemic. What is organizational culture? What does that look like? What do we need to do as businesses and organizations to be able to weather these challenges that come our way, whether they're big like a global pandemic, or whether it's things like, you know, the increase in technology or whatever it happens to be. So I think it's important to answer this question: what is organizational resilience? And again, for time, I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but you probably won't be surprised to know that there is an international standard on organizational resilience. So if you wanted to understand it more, there's further guidance and I can signpost to this. But one of the things that BSI did was some research with Cranfield University, so a very well regarded university that sort of specializes for organizational development. And they wanted to kind of understand what organizational resilience meant in practice. And they came up with this tension quadrant. And I really like it because for me as a health and safety professional, it really spoke to me in a language that I think is what we do as health and safety professionals. We are always trying to move and flex and find a balance between managing the hazards and risks and allowing the activity to happen, between having processes and procedures and standard operating procedures so that we have consistency, but actually then allowing flex for maybe doing something different or unusual. And this is what the tension quadrant is talking to. And it's really important for organizational resilience. So I really like this because I hadn't, you know, I found this out when I joined BSI about 5 years ago, and it just really spoke to me because this is what we do as health and safety professionals, this risk management, this flexing all the time between all of these different pulls and pushes, and finding that balance. So I really like this. I think it talks very much the language that we are used to, and this is what organizations need to think about in terms of their resilience overall. So what does that resilience need to look at? So BSI developed a framework to help organizations understand what this looks like. And you can see that it's got 4 categories and 16 elements. And again, I don't have time to kind of go through this in detail, but it's a really useful framework. And like all of these things, it starts with leadership. You know, just like health and safety, it starts at the top. You know, their attitudes, their values, their behaviors, their actions, how they frame what they want the organization's vision and purpose and values to be. There's also an important thing, if you think back to our risk, we always have to think about what's the appetite for risk. And reputational risk for leadership is one of those areas that they have to explore. What is the appetite? And therefore, where do they want to position some of their actions? Obviously, the finances and the resources that support that. And then next we have people, and of course our leadership are people. And you can see it starts with culture, and ensuring that then we have the community, the awareness and the alignment of our people to drive that culture forward. And then there's kind of the process side. So what are the processes around governance, business continuity, supply chain becoming a much greater issue, and information and knowledge that drives the business. And then the last one, it's kind of framed at product or service, the thing that the company, the organization does. And to be resilient, you know, there's much more focus now on, you know, how as an organization you develop. You can't necessarily be static, you know, so you're looking to the future, you're horizon scanning to understand where the market's going, what might be needed in the future, how you develop your services and your products, how you provide innovation. And part of that then again comes back to that flexibility and the ability to pivot depending on what those first two elements have or other impacts. So a good example of this during the COVID-19 pandemic was in the aerospace industry. Obviously, all air travel stopped basically during the pandemic. So a lot, you know, the aerospace industry was really significantly impacted. But some of the manufacturing elements of the aerospace industry started to work on and produce ventilators for the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a good example of that ability to pivot, to be adaptive depending on what's needed. But all of that only happens if you've got the culture right. And it reinforces what we found in that survey, that organizational resilience index, was that the organizations that focused on the people and their culture were the most resilient. So this, I think, hopefully starts to frame why culture is so important and how we need to think about it. You know, and I'm sure you're all aware of definitions around culture, the actions, behaviors, attitudes, values of people, the way we do things around here. But I like thinking about it from an organizational resilience point of view. I think it talks much more to business risk. It's much more relevant in terms of the context. And, you know, culture and this focus is becoming more and more important, you know, as the Sustainable Development Goals, as focus on ESG reporting becomes greater, then that culture becomes more important. So one of the things that's important to think about in terms of that organizational resilience is, you know, what are the tools that can help us guide us on our way? And for those of you that are familiar, you might recognize the grey boxes that are in the background if you can read it. These are what we call the high-level structure from international standards. So if within your organizations you're using ISO standards, maybe 9001 for quality, 14001 for environmental, 45,001 for health and safety, they have this structure, these clauses. And actually, if you look at those clauses in the Plan, Do, Check, Act, you can see that they are there to help deliver and move an organization towards that resilience. And for 45,001, much more than any other international standards, it recognizes the importance of culture, and therefore it expressly covers it. It covers it in leadership and commitment. That is where culture is driven from. It covers it in hazard identification. It recognizes that if the culture is poor, it is a hazard in itself. It increases risks in a number of different areas, and I'm going to come back to that. And we have to continually work on culture. Continual improvement is part of it. I once heard it described as tending a garden. You know, we will spend time designing our garden, coming up with the best creation, but then we have to maintain it. We have to make sure the weeds come out. We might have to adapt to the fact that certain plants don't thrive in that condition, or the climate change is affects it. So it has to continually improve and evolve. And I really liked that. I thought that worked very well. So a culture is a garden that we have to tend if we want it to continue to thrive and grow. And just to kind of reflect that piece from culture, I just wanted to highlight some of our clients from different sectors who have implemented 45001 and the kind of the things that they found from a culture point of view. So Hill House, as the name suggests, quarry, is a quarrying organisation. And they found that there had been a positive improvement in the culture of their business. And that came through particularly in terms of improved communication between different aspects of the business and up and down the management train. Lerwick, so a port authority, so more logistics, but on the water is how I think about it. They found that it really encouraged their employees to take much greater ownership of their own health and safety. So that improvement in kind of behavior of workers. And really importantly, they found that through that, they empowered their workers. And that had a huge impact in terms of improving the culture. And again, that was seen through improved communication. And then Magna and Stadco, they're a manufacturing organisation in the automotive industry. And they found some of the things that they noticed was that workers and employees were much more willing to come forward with suggestions for improvement without having to be prompted. So I like that one. As a health and safety professionals, we're always thinking about how do we engage the workforce? How do we encourage them to share their thoughts? And Magna found that, you know, this happened as they implemented 45001. And importantly, you know, it reduced incident rates because everyone within the organization was much more focused on risk. And I think just to reinforce that last point, last year, a study that had been done in America by Harvard Business School, so a very well-renowned global research and business organization, had done some independent research to look at whether using 45001 and in particular whether, you know, becoming certified to 45001, whether that improved performance, whether it drove that continual improvement. And they found that it did, absolutely. They found that actually on average, organizations that were certified to a health and safety management system had 20% less reportable accidents than organizations that weren't certified. And for those of you who have got very good eyesight, you might notice that it talks about IOSH 18001. So just to put that in context, when they started this study, it was before 45001 had been published. And also they needed to have lots and lots of data from lots of companies. And because 45001 wasn't there, and I mean, towards the end it came out, but there wasn't enough data to be able to analyze and make, you know, and draw conclusions. So they used 18001. But of course, 45001 has now replaced 18001. And they're looking to potentially review this study in a few years' time to look at it for 45001. And I think that'll be really interesting because 45001 goes further than 18001 did. You know, there's this focus on culture, for instance, that wasn't really there. So it'd be interesting to see whether you get further improvements. So that was framing the culture piece. And I think culture in 20 minutes is a challenge, but hopefully it sets the scene. Hopefully that makes sense. This kind of the way organizations are, their resilience, their ability to manage risk, how 45,001 will come to that. But then the second piece of this topic was around well-being. And actually, I'm going to start slightly back to front. I'm going to answer the well-being question at the end, because I wanted to talk about ISO 45003. So some of you may be aware this is a new guidance standard that was published last year, and its focus is on psychological health and safety. So specifically, the hazards and risks within an organisation that can impact our mental health in particular. It's designed to go with and complement 45,001. So they're designed to go together. And all it really does is really go into lots and lots and lots more detail about this particular type of risk, because there was a recognition by the International Committee that wrote 45,001 that, you know, this area of psychological health and safety is an area that is probably least understood as a health and safety hazard and health and safety risk. So they recognized that there was lots more guidance needed, which is why they wrote this document. And again, I can't really do psychological health and safety justice in the 8 minutes I've got left. So I'm just going to, again, signpost. So they frame these particular types of hazard. They use a particular term that I'm sure some of you have heard, psychosocial hazards. So they're not very, it's not very easy to say in English. I don't know whether translations into different languages make it any easier or not. But they do look at the language and they have to find terminology that will work globally. And things like work-related stress, which we might be more familiar with, or mental ill health, aren't terms that necessarily translate very well globally, or they have too much stigma associated with them to be right. So they use this frame, psychosocial hazards, and it's a makeup of two words. It's psychological and social, and that's because these are the things that will trigger and cause us harm. And in reality, what psychosocial hazards are things that trigger our inbuilt stress response system. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with what that is, but it's a natural inbuilt reaction. It's our fight or flight response. It's inbuilt into our DNA. We don't have any control over it. It's a really great thing. It's designed to keep us safe. If we face a challenge, it's designed to make us either prepare to fight it or to run away to keep us safe. The challenge with this stress response is that whilst in many circumstances it's a great thing designed to keep us physically and mentally healthy and safe, where that stress response is activated a lot, repeatedly, over a long period of time, it causes physical, mental and cognitive harm. And that's when it becomes problematic. That's when this excess stress becomes adverse and it starts to cause harm. And the most common harm that it causes is, from a physical point of view, is things like increased heart rates, which can have an impact on our blood pressure, which might lead to cardiovascular disorders. From a mental health point of view, it increases our negative thinking about our ability to cope, or it increases our anxiety about able to do things, and that can then lead to mental ill health, anxiety and depression. And from a cognitive point of view, and this is an area that's often missed, is that it impacts our ability to learn, to make decisions, and to impact our memory and our confidence. And that means that we are more likely to make errors. And And if we make errors when we are working, that has lots of implications. It might mean that we are more likely to hurt ourselves if we make an error from a health and safety point of view. But if we make an error when we're making something, that can impact quality. If we make an error when we're doing some numerical work, some maths, then that might have an impact in any number of ways. So this is an area that's often overlooked. And 45003 groups these psychosocial hazards into 3 categories. And again, sadly, I haven't got time to go through these in detail, but this ISO is available to for free on the website, and I'm happy to come back and talk in more detail. The first one is around work organisation, and as the name suggests, it's how work is organised, the work that we do, the job demands, how it's structured. But the social factors, so the second group, is really, as the name suggests, the social, the interactions between people in particular. But I wanted to highlight that in these psychosocial hazards, culture is highlighted. And again, just with that organizational resilience piece, if the culture isn't right, then it's going to have a negative impact across all of these different areas. And the last grouping is work environment, equipment and hazardous tasks. So I think with COVID-19, we saw that anxiety, that concern about catching the virus. So that was a stress response. If you work in a high noise environment, or if you're exposed to other safety risks and you are concerned about your safety, then that can also have a psychological impact, that anxiety about being hurt. If we don't have the right tools or equipment, or it's not working properly, then that can create this stress response, this and psychological harm. If you live in an area where there is, or work in an area where there is civil unrest or war, or impacts your personal safety, again, that will have that stress response. And that brings us, I wanted to frame that piece because I wanted to introduce well-being, which is the other part of this talk in the last couple of minutes I've got left. And why I started with 45003 is because, one, it defines well-being, which I'm going to come back to, but fundamentally, if organizations aren't effectively managing these psychosocial risks, you will never achieve really effective workplace well-being. It is fundamental to achieving good workplace well-being. And that's why ISO 45003 defines workplace well-being, and it defines it as the fulfillment of the physical, mental, social and cognitive needs and expectations of a worker related to their work. So I just want to highlight key points. So it's about fulfillment. So what do we need as human beings to feel fulfilled? And what are those needs and expectations? So 45003 isn't a standard on well-being, but it recognizes that unless you deal with psychological health and safety, you will never create the right conditions for well-being. So 45003 talks about promoting well-being, because without psychological health and safety, you won't get well-being. So then the question that kind of comes out is, so what are those needs and expectations? What does that actually look like? What does that break down into? And there are some core elements, and to try and capture those and help organizations understand what those elements are. Last year, I developed the prioritizing people model as a framework to support 45003 to answer the well-being question. And I'm guessing that many of you might be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. something that you may well have come across? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs recognize that humans have a basic needs that they need to have in place, which is really around our welfare and our safety. If we don't have our basic physiological needs met, if we don't have the ability to rest and recuperate, if we don't have the ability to take in food, to have fresh drinking water, then our basic physiological needs can't be met. We need to feel safe, and this is probably the area as health and safety professionals we are most familiar with. It's a basic need. If we don't feel safe at work and we're not kept healthy, then we haven't got those basic needs in place. Once we have those basic needs, then we can start to think about, well, actually, you know, what is it that we need to start to move towards reaching fulfillment? What are those other needs and expectations? And they're framed as psychological needs and expectations. And this is where you then start to see that relationship with 45,003, those psychological needs being addressed, or the psychological risks and hazards being eliminated and mitigated. And once you get those elements in place, you've got all the right conditions to achieve fulfillment for individuals. But the key for this is that if you create all of those right conditions, then not only are you creating the fulfillment, the well-being for people, you are creating a resilient organization. And I'm conscious I'm a little bit over. But there is some further information. I'm happy to signpost as well to any additional information. And that gives us hopefully some time for some questions.
Great. Thank you, Kate. You know, it's a great presentation. And, you know, I know you had a little.
Oh, I've lost your sound. I don't know whether that's just me or whether anybody else can hear Neelish.
Yeah, Neelish, we cannot hear you.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. So great presentation, Kate. You know, I know there was a limitation of time, but you know, you really touched and you know, set the you know, picture around. Basically, you touched on the resilience. You touched on the, you know, the tension you know, quadrant, which I really like that, where you talk about the different you know, 4 elements on progressive and defensive you know, approach. You touch about that, you know, the benefits of ISO 45001 and the really the 45,003, which is, you know, touching on the psychological and the well-being together. So yeah, my colleague Samara is waiting with the questions of the chat box. So Samara, over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Kate, for the wonderful presentation. I have personal interest in this topic, so thank you very much. We have number of very good questions. The first question says, as a safety professional, if I work in an organization where the management are not committed to health and safety, the culture is very poor, how can I have an influence on the management to have a positive change to health and safety culture in the workplace?
Yes. The popular, the everlasting question. Again, can't answer that, and there isn't a magic wand, a single approach that will work. I think for me, the thing that I've found is that the more that you can understand kind of the leadership, what's driving them, what their ambition is for the organization, and start to highlight how their people are essential to that, and therefore creating an environment where their people give their best is probably the best way into that. I mean, I wanted to share the organizational resilience framework because I think that is a very good tool to help with that conversation. I think, you know, I've seen that our leadership is much more focused on this question about what is organizational resilience, what do we need to do, and people lie at the heart of it, and we are about looking after people. So the better you can tell that story or make that link, the better you'll be able to influence and change the way they see things.
Yes, thank you, Kate. The other question is, do we have a tool to measure organizational's resilience?
So yes,
sorry.
so yes, I must confess, I apologize, I didn't include it in the presentation, but I can update it. There is a free tool on the BSI website that you can use, that you kind of, it's a very simple, but it's quite an effective tool, where it asks questions against each of those 16 elements. So that can be useful as a starting point, and we can come in and help you do that. So one of the things we quite often do is come in with the leadership team and get them to do that questionnaire and see what comes out as well.
Thank you. The other question is there any specific risk matrix for psychological risk assessment?
So yes, that's something I didn't get a chance to cover. No, and the reason for that is that fundamentally you should approach it, we as health and safety professionals approach it in exactly the same way as we would any other health and safety hazard, and assess it in exactly the same way in terms of risk. So it's really, I suppose a reassurance, because when we talk about psychological health and safety, I think there's a nervousness that you need to be maybe a professor in psychology or a doctor in mental health, and that's not the case. So I want to, each and every one of you, I want to think back when you started your health and safety career, or maybe when you changed job and you've gone to a new sector or a new business. You will have come across a new hazard that you've never known about before, maybe a new chemical hazard, or maybe you've never dealt with confined space hazards before, and you've had to learn, you've had to understand what those hazards are, the harm that they can cause, and then understand, looking at guidance from IOSH or from regulators, what is the way to control it using the hierarchy of control. And it's exactly the same with psychological health and safety. You approach it in exactly the same way. So those three areas of groups of psychosocial risks that I mentioned: work, organisation, social factors, and our equipment. Within 45,003, which is free to read on the ISO website, there's 3 pages, and in reality they kind of list all of the hazards. But then it's going through and identifying whether that is a hazard within your organization, who's at risk, what the level of harm is, what the likelihood of that harm is, and then doing the risk assessment and then starting to think about what the controls are using the hierarchy of control.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have a question, Kate, to you. As we were talking about COVID crisis and the experience of working from home for employees, as a consumer, I have seen that some of organizations that I used to deal with, there was a drop in their quality, the level of satisfaction. That's, I'm talking about myself, probably other people, the performance of these organizations. We can see that there's a reduction in the quality and the response. And I wonder how organizations can differentiate whether this was because they were not ready enough to provide the right technology for working from home, or whether they are staff being disorganized simply, or whether because there is lack of communication within the organization because people work from home, or it's just the low staff morale because of the pandemic. How can we differentiate as organization what was the actual reason? Because it's a common problem, really.
Yeah, so yeah, again, can't answer that in a quick way. But I think use our skills as a health and safety professional when we investigate an incident, when something is not going to plan or hasn't gone to plan, we investigate it. We look at all of those exactly as you said, we look at all of those different things that you've mentioned and go, well, was it this, or was it this, or was it a combination of this? And then start to identify what we can do about it. I think one of the things that I am seeing, though, is that, again, that poor culture is often underlying it. And if you think back to those case studies that I shared from organizations that had seen improvements in culture, one of the things all three of them talked about was the improvement in communication. So I think that communication piece is probably somewhere where I might start looking.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Samara, for taking all these questions. But because of the time constraint,
Okay.
need to stop Q&A here. But thanks, Kate, for sharing these great examples where the organizations really got benefited because of implementing ISO 45001. And so just the last comment from you: are in future the organizations need to go like certification for ISO 45001 in the same way, and they need to go for the 45003, or it's just a guidance?
So look, certification to standards is always voluntary. I don't think there's any laws in any country that says you have to have it. Sometimes there are contractual conditions, particularly in things like the built environment. Your principal contractor or the client will have a contractual requirement to have 45001, so that can drive it. And sometimes organizations, from a reputational risk point of view, want to have 45001. So BSI do offer a certification for 45003, again, voluntary. It's brand new, so we haven't started to see it kind of flow down the supply chain as a requirement yet, but I know, talking to large organizations, that is likely to happen. And what we are seeing is that although there isn't legislation, law about implementing and using 45003, there is an increase of legislation and focus by regulators on psychological health and safety management. So in the same way that we might use 45001 to help us comply with legislation, then I think we'll start to see more organizations also use 45003 to help comply with that legislation that's coming through, and that focus by the regulators.
Thank you, Kate. And I think by seeing your presentation, I need to organize a specific session or workshop for the 45003. So definitely, I'll be in contact with you, and we'll contact you soon in the future. With this, thanks to Kate. And moving forward, the next topic for the day is fugitive emission monitoring and control. We all know that the climate change, the global environment impact is the talk of the day across the world. There is a COPs going on, and the different countries are talking on that. And we are lucky to have Engineer Majid Al Saidi with us. Engineer Majid Al Saidi, he's working as a VP HSSE in the downstream, but he's also, apart from the occupational health and safety, he's an expertise in the environment, because he's basically he's a environment engineer with the qualification. He has done major projects on the HSE readiness in Oman, especially the Sohar Refinery 2, Levoplastic from transition from the construction to the operation phase. Majid is also leading the downstream HSSE function in the OQ from last 3 years, and which include the operation of Mina Al-Fal Refinery and the Sohar. And also he's leading the Sohar OQ petrochemical complex. He holds the bachelor degree in petroleum and natural gas engineering from Sultan Qaboos University. He's also certified recruiter manager, leadership and management from Chartered Management Institute, John Maxwell Company, and the IMD Business School. So we are very happy to have Engineer Majid with us. And Engineer Majid, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nalish, and for the good introduction, and also thank you, Kate, for the nice presentation. I'm also very interested on the topic. Leadership and psychological safety is very important topic nowadays, and I'll definitely go back to your presentation and then maybe come back to you if I have any more questions. And let me share my slides. So my presentation is little bit on the application or OQ. Yeah, OQ experience on fugitive emissions. Just let me make it. Is it visible? Yeah, okay.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. If you can just click on your display settings again, and then click on swap to presenter mode. Just at the top.
I'm not used to Zoom.
That's okay. So where you have your presentation, you've got it on speaker notes right now. So
Yeah.
you've got the arrow just next to taskbar. But if you go to next to it, it says the display settings.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And then
Is it
click
better?
swap presenter view to slideshow. Brilliant.
Is it better now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so my presentation is about the fugitive emission and control, and specifically is OQ experience or application. So I will share how we manage to have the fugitive emission and how we control them in the last maybe 12 years. At the beginning, I will give you maybe a quick introduction on OQ, and then we'll talk about the fugitive emission control management journey of OQ, specifically downstream refineries in Sohar complex. And also we'll talk about the fugitive emission impact, fugitive emission control projects, and also we have the fugitive emission controls. I'm sure you know about the leak detection and repair, and also we'll talk about it a little bit and what's its benefit for OQ, and also at the end we'll summarize. So as a quick introduction for OQ, OQ started in 1982 with the first refinery in Oman, in Muscat. We call it MAF refinery. It sits in Min Al Bahar refinery, and then in 1996 we have Oman Oil Company, and then after that there was more companies owned by Oman Oil, basically majority of them. In 2011 we had ORPEC, which is basically integration of three companies, the refineries, aromatics, and also the BP at Sohar complex and MAF refinery. And in 2019 we have the integration of OQ, which is between Oman Oil and ORPEC, which cover all the Oman Oil owned company, the 9 core business, which is Oman Oil and ORPEC. This is about the refineries, basically. So we have 2 refineries, one in MAF refinery, one in Muscat, Min Al Bahar refinery, one in Sohar. So in Sohar, it's basically, we call it Sohar refinery 1 and Sohar refinery 2. Some details on the capacity of those 2 refineries. This is a little bit on the petrochemical part. So we have the plastics in Sohar complex, where we have the old polypropylene plant, and also newly or recently commissioned LBIC. We call it LBIC, Lioplastic, which is again producing of plastics. We have the methanol plant in Salalah, ammonia plant in Salalah, and also aromatics in Sohar, and OQ own 50% of OMFCO and so. This is more about the logistics. So we distribute our fuels through different terminals in Sohar, in Jafnin, and in Salalah. And there's a pipeline also connecting Sohar to Jifnin and Sohar to Minan Fahar refinery for product purposes and also crude oil. This is about OQ, just to give you an idea on what is OQ and what is the different location that we have, and also zoom in into the petrochemical refineries, the downstream part. Nowadays, the refineries, we call it RBI, which is refinery and petrochemical industries. So our journey with the fugitive emissions started in 2009, where we have a lot of challenges in environment, specifically in Sohar complex, which trigger a lot of community complaint, water complaint specifically. And we had to do an odor quantification survey in 2010 to quantify the odors around our facilities, and also to identify the sources of those odors. And after that, we did some projects to improve and mitigate those odors and reduce them from the source, or also control them. So we cover the wastewater, the main wastewater treatment plant in Sohar Refinery 1, we call it. We implemented an odor abatement project in Sohar Refinery 1, and also we implemented and maintained a leak detection and repair for the refinery, and then we extended to all of our facilities. Yeah, sure. Fugitive emission impact, as all of you know, there's different impact on fugitive emissions. That can be economical, where you lose your feedstock, your mid product, or intermediate product, or final products, especially in oil and gas industry. And also there is environmental impact, whether it is climate change, GHG emissions, or air pollutants. And in some cases, it's a nuisance, where you still have the ambient air quality below the target, but people do complain about them, and it's making a nuisance to the people, which still consider as environmental impact. And finally, on the health and safety aspects, you reduce your people exposure to the fugitive emission, which means also you reduce the employee exposure to the hazardous air pollutants. So we have an extensive program on the environmental improvement projects, we call it at that time, but I will focus only on the project related to odor management. We have a project to cover the wastewater treatment plan, the main one. We have another project of odor abatement, which include the covering of wastewater treatment, but also include the treatment of those gases below these covers, plus also managing the other areas of fugitive emissions. We started to introduce the leak detection and repair. We also want to monitor the odor with online monitoring devices. We call it the IOSH, which we monitor the intensity of the odor, and also we trace the different sources. Fugitive emission and can cause odor, and it's very challenging sometimes to find the source of the odor, specifically when you have an upset in the plant, or shutdown, or startup, and you need a tool to trace back those odors, and then you take the proper action. And of course, we start also to manage the community odor complaints, where we need to log them, register them, and then have a clear process to investigate them, and also take the proper action to improve and correct. We had also ambient air quality monitoring stations, but we introduced additional stations, mobile stations, where we have flexibility to move those stations around the community and assess the ambient air quality station in specific locations. For example, if we are receiving more orders in specific location from the community, so we can, in additional to the IOSH or the odor monitoring, which monitor only the odor, we can monitor the ambient air quality to verify whether those air quality is still within the limits, or it's higher than national and also international standard. In the odor abatement project, which is covering the wastewater treatment plan, and also covering some of the open drain beds, and also treat those gases below those covers. So what we achieve through this, in the wastewater treatment plan, we reduce some specific gases like H2S, ammonia, and benzene to zero emissions. And we reduce the other fugitive emission from other basins and discharge point or drain point to more than 90%, which help us to manage the community complaint and reduce it to less than 95%. These are some pictures of the those are some pictures of the wastewater treatment. So those are basically the covers, and this is just a picture of the odor abatement project to give you a flavor on how it looks like. Moving to the leak detection and repair. This program, as I mentioned, we started 2012 as one of the initiatives to improve ambient air quality and also to control odor emission, and then also the fugitive emission specifically. It's a standard program normally used in oil and gas industry, where you use the conventional leak detection and method, FID methods, and also we used smart LDR in some companies, they call it, where you use basically intrinsically safe cameras to detect also the leaks, and there is some method also to calculate those emissions through the camera. What we get from LDR, so the leak detection, whether it is a smart through the camera or the conventional ways, it will give you, you will identify the sources, and then you will have the opportunity to repair those sources, which will reduce immediately your emissions. Or in some cases, if those repairs cannot be done online, where you need to go for shutdown, those repairs schedule in the shutdown, and you can tackle them there. And this definitely will impact or will reduce the fugitive emissions that you have. And normally we calculate those reductions to find out what is our saving. And also in some cases we calculate also the cost saving, but in our case it was not really significant. However, the emission and environmental part was really interesting. This is a quick glance on our journey on fugitive emissions. So as I mentioned, we started 2012. Maybe I will give a little bit background on this abbreviation and what does it mean. So SR1, this is Sohar Refinery 1. AB, this is the aromatics plant. PP, this is the polypropylene plant. MAF, this is the Muscat Refinery. Jifnain, this is the terminal in Jifnain. Raisut is the terminal or depot in Raisut. MSCB or MSCB, we call it. This is the product pipeline between Sohar, Jifnain, Minaf Refinery Jifnain, and also Jifnain and Muscat Airport. And LBIC is basically lower plastic industrial complex. Those show you the year where we conducted the LDR project for each plant, and you can see we have already 2 cycles for each plant or almost. Through those, we call them campaign or programs, we basically managed to reduce the fugitive emission of total 70% from the baseline of each plant, which of course resulted in less fugitive emission to the community, and also reduce the ambient air quality odors or reduce the odor complaints. After conducting the 2 cycle, we can see also RBI, we call it refinery and petrochemical industries, has less fugitive emission compared to our peers in terms of production and also refineries or petrochemical areas, which shows the benefit of having the program in first place. This explains little bit on the quantification of emissions that we have. Again, I assume now you are familiar with those names. What does it mean? This is Sohar Refinery 1, for example, and you have the emission kg per year. This data is from the latest campaign or program that we have, and you can see the orange bar represent the first measurement before repair, and this bar, which is the light blue, is representing the emission after the repair, and the dark blue represent the saving or the reduction of the emission. And you can see in all of our plants in the last program there is a reduction. In some cases, the reduction was not high, but there is a reason behind it. And because this is the second campaign or second program, and if you compare it with the first campaign or program, you can see a big difference. And in the next slide shows the comparison between the different campaign or the different programs that we have over the years for specific plants. So for example, also Refinery 1, you can see the emission of Sohar Refinery 1 over the years. This is the first program in 2012 to 15. This is the second program or campaign, and this is the third one, which shows each campaign or each program there is a reduction of fugitive emission, which indicate that the previous program was, or the repair part from the previous program was really effective, which drive the overall fugitive emission reduction. Okay. This is summary on the benefits or what we basically achieve from implementing the fugitive emission program for a similar industry, the oil and gas, refineries and petrochemical. So basically, we came a long way where we have a lot of complaints from the community about the odor, specifically in Sohar area. We have high fugitive emissions. And also, we don't have good neighboring with the community. And they complain one thing, but also community was not really happy to have us working next to them. But having this program with different initiatives and different projects, basically to identify the fugitive emission, quantify it, monitor it, and also control it by different projects, help us a lot to reduce the community complaints, and also help us to be a better neighbor to our community, and also from environment point of view, improve the ambient air quality around us and the community at large. I don't have a lot of slides. This is the last slide that I have. I hope it was interesting. It's more about the application or specific effort that we have in OQ, RBI, or refineries and petrochemical. And if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Said, Majid, and congratulations to the Sohar, to the OQ and the Sohar refinery, all the operations of OQ for reducing the fugitive emission to 73%, achieving the 95% complaints for the community. I myself has sensed many times when going to the Min Alpha refinery, the emission coming or the smell coming, which is really impacting. But I think your project has really worked well, and also congratulations for your different initiative. So the first question from my side before I hand over to Samara, because she must have a lot of questions to you. The Oman is working on the Vision 2040. So what is the forward planning with for the OQ or for your team to reach to the carbon neutrality and work more progression on this climate change?
Yeah, I get recently I get a lot this same question from almost all the visitors. I think everybody knows Oman announced the net zero of 2050. Now, what is the OQ commitment, to comply with this is still not yet announced. However, we have a lot of initiatives. We are anticipating this, and there is basically a dedicated function where we look into alternative energy, and within that function, we have a team, we call it decarbonization team, where we look into different opportunity across all OQ operations, whether it is a downstream operation or upstream exploration and production. And they work with those different units, like with myself, to find those opportunities and also plan the way forward. So we are still on the planning phase to see where we can do. Talking about risk, Kate talked a lot about risk management, but also climate. We need to do a climate change risk management, basically. And risk management should cover two parts: the transactional part, which talk about the regulations, the mandate from the government or from outside Oman, and also within OQ, because if there is a regulation comes from the corporate, for example, definitely need to comply with it. But also look to the physical part, where we face it a lot in Oman when we talk about storms, cyclones. In the last 5 or 10 years, we have a lot of cyclones, and we as industry, we also had a lot of challenges to respond and to mitigate the risk out of those cyclones. So I think as OQ is still in, we have the governance part or the organization part ready. We're still working on our plan. We're still also developing our climate change risk assessment, we call it, where we work both in transactional and physical. And hopefully we can announce something once we have something concrete. All in all, we need to comply with the Oman vision of 2050 net zero. And everybody also expecting government will announce some short-term target on 2030. And hopefully we can comply also with that short-term targets.
Well, that's really great, Sheikh Mazid, Engineer Mazid, because the news around which is floating is, Oman is really leading in the region, ahead of all other, the countries in the region. And really, the Oman has taken the initiative on the, for the Vision 2040 for the carbon neutrality, or early Vision 2030 and 2050. So over to Samara for the other questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Engineer Majid, for the excellent presentation. We have a number of questions. I'll try to summarize them so we can cover most of them. We have a question from our colleague Jai, does OQ have technology to reduce pollution emissions at source itself? So it's a proactive prevention method.
Yeah, so there is a lot of technologies. We don't invent those technologies, but we definitely use them. So I mentioned about the odor abatement project, one of the projects that we did, that is a source reduction. And also we have so many other projects. Maybe I'll give some examples. The odor abatement project is basically talks about collecting the emissions from the basins and then treat them with whether this will be a scrubber treatment, for example, or activated carbon filters. But also, if we talk about source reduction, we have, for example, some of our initiatives to reduce the SO2 emission, and that by reducing the sulfur in the feedstock of that specific unit. And of course, this will be done after you remove the sulfur species and you recover it in a separate unit. This is one example. And then for air emissions, there is a different technologies that use in different refineries, where you have scrubbers, you have burners, you have electrostatic precipitators, etc., where we also using the same technologies here in OQ to ensure those emissions are done at that source. With respect to odor emissions, for example, in refineries, there is also sometimes there is a technique, and I will give a simple example. When you want to take a sample for a product, normally you drain, and then those drains goes to in your sewers, and then you take it through the wastewater treatment. And at source prevention or control, you don't drain this, when you want to take sample, don't drain it to the drain. You have a system, they call it closed drain system, where you circulate that product back into your tank, and then you take the sample to analyze the quality of your product, which we have it in Sohar Refinery 2, for example. In Sohar Refinery 2 also, the plant is relatively new. So our waste treatment plant by design was covered, and there is a nitrogen blanket on top or below the cover to ensure there is no accumulative of the fugitive emissions in the first place. So I just give some examples on prevention at source.
Thank you. The other question is, does OQ participate in carbon credit program?
I think there will be in future, definitely. Currently, at least downstream, there is no, we don't have any carbon credit program. We did not participate in any carbon credit program. Maybe other streams within a few, I'm not really sure. But I understand the OQ chemicals, that's the international part that we have for OQ, which is in Germany and US. There was a discussion about the carbon credit. How far that discussion went, I'm not really sure.
Thank you. The other question, it's not very clear to me. I will read the question. If it's clear to you, then answer it. Otherwise, we can ask them to type it again. From Mr. Murtaba, he says, it's a direct question, so it doesn't appear in the chat. What is the advantage of cyclones when compare them with other methods? Is the question clear?
Yeah, maybe he is very technical. Maybe he talks about cyclones to prevent the particulate matters before it goes to the flue gases. Maybe this is what I understand. Which we have them. Cyclone is also one technique or technology to prevent the particulate matters to go to the fuel gases in the first place. So we have them in the fluidized unit that we have. We have the cyclones, and also we monitor the effectiveness of those cyclones to ensure that it does not carry over the catalyst or particles outside, not for environmental reasons only, but also for economical reasons as well.
Thank you. Another question from Jay, as per OQ environmental impact assessment, which particular hazardous substance is challenging to handle?
Yeah. So in each plant, we have different environmental impact assessment, and our plants was built in different time. So basically we have, in Sohar specifically, we have at least maybe 6 impact assessment. Environmental impact assessment is normally done by the consultant even before the detailed engineering study. I have my personal opinion on this, but I don't think environmental impact assessment usually reflect all the reality after the operation. And I have a lot of discussion with the Environment Authority. I work in the Environment Authority basically for 3 years, but even after that, I have a lot of discussion, which in my opinion, I think there should be a condition where the environmental impact assessment should be updated after the detailed engineering, because that reflects a lot of details on the emission. Generally, we are a hydrocarbon industry, and we have a lot of emission, air emission, and also we have water and we have waste. So I cannot really specify one, but we have a different type of pollutant in air and water, in waste. The most challenging maybe was the odor, which I give brief about our efforts, which basically was challenging to identify the sources. And also it took a lot of effort. OQ or Orbic at that time spent more than $73 million to mitigate the odor issue only.
Thank you, Engineer Mazid, and thank you, Samara. Because of the time constraint, I need to stop the Q&A here. But definitely, all the questions which are parked on the chat box will be, so sending to Engineer Mazid, and we'll be getting it, sorted out, and we'll send the updates to you. So with this, let me give a lot of thanks to Kate for coming for this today's event and speaking on the culture and well-being. We'll be issuing this e-certificate and we'll be sending it through the email. I know Kate has left because of the other commitments. And thank you, Engineer Mazid, for joining us today and giving the insight on the fugitive emission and monitoring and the the updates on the OQ. Thanks for having you here. It's a great pleasure for us. And I'll be sending this e-certificate as a token of thanks from the IOSH Oman branch. So thanks for attending. These are the future events which we as I promised that every month on the 3rd Wednesday we have the branch events. So we are also trying to get the physical events where we can meet personally and organize this. So these are the tentative dates which we recently finalized on our committee meetings. So this is a year plan. So please book your calendar accordingly so that if you don't get any updates, check on the IOSH website and book your calendar for attending these sessions. So we'll be trying to get different updates on the Oman occupational health, OHS requirement. We are going to have the workshops on the risk normalization and investigation. We'll also have the behavioral aspects of the mental health and the behavioral safety. Driving HSE excellence, we are we'll be having the panel discussion on that. So please book your calendar accordingly. Just those who are not a member, why you need to join the IOSH, because you get IOSH is advocating on the principles and values on influencing the change in occupational health and safety. It's give you the opportunity for careerists, for ambitious individuals, and for opportunity to progress. It also gives a great opportunity for the new learners who are hungry for the knowledge, resources, and for their personal development, and also for the new professionals who are early in their career, how they can progress in their career by getting this exposure and experience from these events or from the membership, and also from the mentors. So these are the different benefits of getting into the IOSH. You get the IOSH stamp of excellence, because if you are an IOSH member, you get your designatory letter to use. You can use the IOSH competency framework, which is specific to the members. You can be part of the future leaders community. You can do the networking or attend these free events. IOSH also got the IOSH mentoring scheme, benevolent fund. So IOSH magazines, career hub, no time to lose campaign. So these are the different reasons why you need to why you should go for the IOSH membership. These are the current membership, which is going to change soon. So I'll just take you to the new membership. So we will have the new student membership for those who are working or studying for the occupational health and safety courses. Then you'll have the associate membership, technical membership, certified membership, which was earlier called as a grade IOSH, and then chartered membership and the chartered fellow membership. So those who are not a member of IOSH, I urge to get into this membership, because IOSH membership also help you to develop your competency through the IOSH competency framework, where you have a CPD resources and you have a blueprint, where blueprint will help you for your self-assessment. It gives you the self-assessment tool. It also helps you to develop your personal development plan. It gives the platform for your CPD, and also when you are a chartered chartered member of IOSH or chartered fellow, you need to get into the IOSH ethical practice, which is going to be compulsory for all the chartered fellow and chartered chartered member and chartered fellows. This is a free e-learning and assessment tool, which all members can get benefit. So as a blueprint, again, you get the CPD resources. You can keep record of all the CPDs, your development plan, and also you can do your e-learnings. IOSH also open the research program, so you can if you are doing any research in the occupational health and safety, you can get benefit by applying to the IOSH for the research fund, and you can get benefit from that. IOSH has also joined different organizations, and there are focusing on equality, diversity, and inclusion for the occupational health and safety professionals. So IOSH has recently done the survey with the Young Foundation and the different other 11 professional bodies. So if you have any feedback or thoughts on the betterment of IOSH or betterment of the occupational health and safety professionals, you can give your feedback to the IOSH, which can be taken for as a part of the survey. So thank you once again, everybody, for joining today. Just immediate after when we close the session, you will get a pop-up for the survey. So please spend time for giving your feedback on this today's event, on the suggestion on the future events. You can also note our IOSH Oman branch email ID. So if you have any queries or any questions, you can raise an email to us and our membership team, or the executive committee will come back to you. So once again, thank you for joining, and looking forward to see you all in our next future events. With that, again, thanks to Engineer Mazid for joining. Thank you to Samara and Jayendran for supporting for today's event. Thanks to Ameline and all the members for joining today. Thank you and good night. Goodbye.